top 3 sellers selling ashwagandha in US are actually the Chinese manufacturers.
Next decade is going to be very exciting. Building or India to the US or India exporting.
Health tracker in Germany, people will pay you top dollar for it, which will be 4 times what an Indian will pay.
If you have won India, does that give you a license to win globally also? If you ever, let's say in your aspirations, wanted to build a global company, is it to build out global day one, right? And not focus on India.
Selling in India and going to US after a few years is actually a waste of time. Next 10 years, it will all boil down to this
Insight
and product quality, right? Really, that is what will drive the adoption.
If you want to sell enterprise, people will be needed. Those people will never be replaced by AI. कल के विराट कोहली पे बैठ लेंगे. आज का विराट कोहली तो बहुत महंगा है ना.
Huge trend of people trying to do wellness and health out of India for US.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 18 of the Asymmetric podcast. We are back with a guest. We have looked at a lot of data and we have realized that however great 3 talking heads look, 4 talking heads actually look even better. The data actually shows that the retention is better when we have a 4th talking head as well. So we saw a lot of the comments that you give us and we realized that a bunch of episode ideas on what we should cover actually lies in the interest that you guys show. Special shout out to Chinmay Joshi, who was the first comment, which he was very clear in the last episode when he read first. Like I finished the episode and I put the first comment. But yes. He was the one who asked, thoda out of India for the world scene track karo. Where he mentioned that while Darwin Box is the latest, we do have Postman, we have Head Out, we have What Fix, we have quizzes, everyone doing 50 million plus revenue and broadly India to US businesses. So kudos for all of you are giving comments and today's episode is exactly a reflection of that. We're going to cover largely India to US opportunities in entrepreneurship. We also have an interesting segment on sports and media. I know we just are feeling very happy after winning the Champions Trophy. I think people are more happy. I don't know. Some people are less happy that Rohit Sharma didn't resign. But there's a very interesting segment on, are we actually looking at sports? Are we looking at media and entertainment? What does a sporting model for the future look like? And for all of this, we have an expert, Darshit, who's a general partner at Sparrow Capital, micro VC in some sense, now raising their 3rd fund at $50 million, largely focused on India, but they see like 5,000 deals a year and therefore we thought, why not get a VC who looks at so much deal flow for this topic, specifically on entrepreneurship and venture capital.
Amazing. Chinmay, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And keep them coming. Hopefully this is an episode that adds value to a lot of the triggers for your question. I don't know what your line of work is, but hopefully it's helpful for you professionally as well. Just I want to take 2-3 minutes. Opportunities to build global companies from India, resurrect exports, leverage talent and tech to create world-class products, right? I think that's broadly, I think disclaimer is we are not economists or experts, we're just observers. I speak on behalf of Chirag and Revant. Darshit, of course, is an expert on the topic. I think the it reminds us of a global opportunity. We have companies across the board, right? And they differ in a lot of ways. I think a lot of the companies from Freshworks and Zoho to which were the classic disruptors in SaaS to now more new age companies like Darwin Box to I spoke to the Mokobara founders recently where they have set up a new store in Dubai, which is their 27th store and apparently doing extremely well and has paid back in the first 1 or 2 months. So apparently a gorgeous store. They just find all the Samsonite stores all over the world and put their store right next to it. Oyo, of course, has found an inorganic way to kind of go outside. Rebel Foods, Revant, you know very well, I think decided to go outside Indonesia and, Ankush, who's been on the pod before, is largely responsible for. So it's not just a SaaS thing. It's I think we are seeing industries across the board and founders and companies building from India for the world, finding their foothold. Lenskart, of course, is, taking on Warby Parker in different geographies as well. Pixel is, in very innovative space tech. So you see this across industries, across kinds of offerings, across geographies. It's not just from India for the US or for Europe, but it's Middle East, Southeast Asia, organic, inorganic, SaaS and other industries. I think the axes of of from India for the world are many, and it actually poses a lot of questions. So I think again context: $50 billion USD export deficit, right? I think making for the world and bringing dollars in. The way China did for 25 years is a massive unlock. I think Revant, you have kind of covered this a few episodes back, and something that possibly India cannot do without. I think it took us into the manufacturing discussion a little bit, but building from India for the world in the knowledge economy, in the AI economy, in the service economy, something we've done through our IT revolution. But now I think the opportunities are a lot more. Tariff wars will make this a little bit tricky, right? I think the whole world is possibly a little bit myopic on this, but building from India for the world. Like today, for example, I got a bunch of messages in one of our categories. BIS standards have started getting applied. Things are getting inventory in customs is now becoming a metric people are canning, right? So tariff wars in general will make it a little difficult. AI disruption is going to put pressure on IT, right? I think we still underestimate what kind of downsizing we will see, especially in white collar workforce, and whether domestic or internal solutions will create more cheaper costs for companies around the world. So given that this accounts for 20% of our exports, I think a national economy vulnerability to this disruption is very high. So definitely something we should think about. There is a gift city that has come up. It's, I think, whether it is a hyped wild card or potential to become a Singapore, Dubai in the next 5 years is anyone's guess. But we do know, for example, at least investors who are now setting up an office there. And, I would love to kind of get Darshit's view on this. Kunal Behl from Snapdeal and Titan kind of came up with the advantages of incorporating in India far way out, those outside. Access to capital is high. Going public is a lot easier. Tax structures are becoming a lot more friendly. So people are, this whole Delaware, Singapore, etc. Like Flipkart, for example, faced a lot of difficulty because they were based in Singapore but acquired by an American company but serving an Indian consumer. So incorporation now becomes an important founder choice, and it's across industries. It's not just a SaaS question anymore. So that leads to Indian founders having to make some very solid design choices, right? So is it like the number one is dominate India first versus global from day one? And for example, Oyo and Rebel built out their businesses in India, while Pixel, InMobi, Freshworks, Zetwork have kind of said the world is our oyster and we'll figure it out from day one. We don't want to, kind of limit ourselves. So is India a sandbox or a trap? That's I think one design choice. And second one, I think, is costs are primary advantage. I think we've always found arbitrage globally through cheap labor driven value creation. But now with, for example, Pixel or, some of the tech companies, Zetwork, I saw the facilities recently. I think clearly price is not the only thing. I think there is just cutting edge innovation, product quality. Darwinbox again is is an example of innovative solutions which are very nicely nuanced for cultural context. So also, is low price affecting perception long term? Do we want to be known as Indian and hence cheap? What could the export mix be? Whether it's EV, biotech, space tech, consumer brands like Mokobara. I think Revant with Mosaic and Bombay Shaving Company, for example, we keep exploring. Like, do we understand the global consumer? And I think at some point, some of us are genuinely building brands for the world. How to play will differ hugely depending upon where to play. Cultural, social, governmental, legal nuances key. But I think how do founders navigate where to play first, right? So Lenskart and Darwinbox, for example, Southeast Asia, Middle East were where they kind of first went, while Freshworks, etc. went US first. So again, different ways to think about it. And I think founders have to take these choices upfront when they're actually modeling their business. Can we build a really premium brand for the world from India? I think we've all tried to think about this, discuss it. Like, for example, someone like me will always say we don't understand hair removal on skin for someone in the US compared to India as easily. But I think that's just a short-term myopic thing. Long-term, we do believe that there is an opportunity to build global brands for the world from India without it being like truly Indian. Like, it's not a Haldiram thing, but kind of truly global in their appeal, visual delight, semiotics, etc. And I think the most important thing, I think Indian promoters and founders have usually struggled to hire global CEOs, adapt to global cultures. Like, imagine, having a North America CEO for an Indian conglomerate, where, typically there is a lot more control by the promoter. A lot of the power centers are sitting in Mumbai or Delhi or whatever. And hence we have still, even though we have like large businesses, Even like, for example, conglomerates like Tata Group or Reliance or Mahindra Group, who have large global footprints, typically struggle to truly become global and have massive international kind of setups. So that's the case now. Is it time that new age founders with the kind of digital industrialists Revant spoke about in the last part, is it now time that they are the ones who build out truly global Indian companies? And I think this is a thought starter framework, Darshit, that we had in mind. But happy to kind of start this discussion wherever relevant.
Well, great question, Shantanu. But maybe would love to see some data on, what Chinmay actually triggered as a discussion, that there are so many companies doing startups who are doing 50, 100 million plus revenues, which is building from India to US. And you got a few of the logos, but I was quite surprised to see the number of non-SaaS companies that are now building India to US. So maybe Darshit, if you could just give us some, because you've been a venture capitalist now for more than a decade. So you've seen a few cycles now. Would be interesting to see that data, right? That how many companies have really become large from India to US, which are venture backed. And is there actually data to show that this is a higher IRR game or a higher MOIC game, if I can call it that? Because I would like to believe that an international TAM that is larger, if you get PMF, one of the biggest problems that's occurred for India venture is it's taken 12 to 15 years for you to enter and exit a business, right? Your fund returns have not happened in the classical 10-year time frame because companies itself are taking much longer to get to 100 million plus revenue. But I think I was looking at some data that India to US or India to international businesses specifically have actually scaled to 100 million plus in less than 10 years, which makes it far more interesting from a venture capital perspective as well.
No, you're right. I think if you ask, the trend typically started with SaaS, right? So I think Freshworks was probably one of the first few companies. In fact, before Freshworks also, there were companies like Mu Sigma and Inmobi, basically, which already showed the way to build the companies out of India, which are more product oriented, right? And I think Freshworks was founded somewhere around 2011. And since then, if you look at today, if I just look at SaaS, there are somewhere around roughly 10 plus companies which are in 100 million plus ARR range. And if I look at the 50 million plus ARR range, that's somewhere around 25 companies. And 10 million plus ARR, that's roughly 80 companies, right? So these numbers in 2015, if I just like 9-10 years back, these numbers were very tiny. Like there were probably 2-3 companies which were 100 million plus ARR. And so I think you guys should put up a screenshot of Bessemer comes out with the India SaaS report every year. I think it has some of these numbers. How many companies out of India, SaaS companies out of India has crossed what ARR? I think that would really give you some sense on basically how the scale has improved over last 10 years, right? But I think what is more exciting is what you're showing is non-SaaS, right? I think, and that was pretty much non-existent probably even 3 years back, right? I think nobody was talking about things which was non-SaaS, right? And if you look at this list, it's pretty exciting to see that there are so many of these companies which are able to, non-SaaS able to get to the scale they are able to get to, right? So I think that is where I think there is a lot of, in my view, because it's pretty exciting because if you look at it, the way India's venture ecosystem was started we are bringing the global innovations to India, right? So the Amazon happened in India, we're building Amazon for India and we were building Uber for India and we were building XYZ that's how India's venture ecosystem actually started. Then we moved from to say, okay, we can build some products out of India and then sell into the global markets. But I feel in next 10 years, we'll see, say, for example, a Spotify out of India, right? Which is just a truly global first business, massive scale business built out of India, right? So if you look at Nokia or Spotify or Canva, none of these were actually US businesses, right? These were the businesses out of Europe and Australia. I I feel India will have those multi-billion-dollar company out of India, which is truly global first, right? So I think that's where I think some of the early signs of these non-SaaS businesses that are showing is probably leading up to that.
Got it. And, I was noticing an interesting trend that what scaled first was more digital content. So for a Pocket FM, which is a very unique content on audio, like technically they're trying to build a Netflix equivalent for audio, and they realized that international markets could be large. And then you have a team coming out of Pocket FM building a Dashtune, right? A Dashtune which is building AI-generated comics for the international markets, right? Again, that got funded, seems to be doing okay. So these are more digital content which is built for Europe, built for US, where people are willing to pay for content. Or gaming, for example, right? Like gaming studios make a punch load of money in the US. There are a lot of Japanese and Korean gaming studios that focus, let's say, on the US or European market. Play Simple was an example that got to 100 million plus revenue, got sold, amazing outcome for the founders as well as VCs. I'm sure a lot of other gaming companies which are also trying to build for these markets. But it's a little harder because understanding the nuance of the international consumer, whether it's Europe or Middle East or US, requires a little local flavor. And I think the bigger problem becomes the go-to-market strategy. Now, I think SaaS, the go-to-market strategy was very clear. Hire a great VP of sales or one of the founders has to sit in the US or Europe and sell. Get to understanding ki, theek hai, ye bechna hai, this is your ICP of who's going to buy. And then hire a VP of sales and then go for it, right? But consumer companies, GTM is much, much, much harder. Like compared to the 30, 40, 50 SaaS companies that are now at 50 million plus and doing well. While it has started, it seems that getting success in consumer is a little harder because CACs are crazy, right? We've had edtech companies try this. As you know, we covered Ultrahuman is now doing more than 100 million. They've opened a factory in the US. Is there a in-between before? Like there are a lot of these B2B companies, whether it's chemical suppliers or fashion or manufacturing with Zetwork, who also said that in the end, can we export from India to these larger markets, where the GTM is a little easier because the B2B GTM seems a little easier than the B2C GTM, if I can call it that. Is there a view on that from the venture side?
Yeah. I believe it takes one company to show the way, right? So I think it's never what works and what doesn't work is in context of till the Freshwork proved that you can sell a product out of India and build a large business. I don't think any of us would have imagined the SaaS out of India was an exciting theme, right? But I think that happened, right? And it's been now 13, 14 years since that's been happening. And there's a lot of tribal knowledge around what it takes to build a company out of India, right? I think that is what has helped a lot of people who are now trying to build SaaS out of India. There's so much knowledge, right? How to go about doing GTM, right? What mistakes not to make, right? I think these are early days for the consumer-focused businesses, but I'm sure people who have seen Pocket FM scale, right? The people who are part of the journey, they now understand that what it takes to build a digital content, truly global digital content business out of India, right? So there is a playbook which at least they understand and they probably won't make the similar mistakes. Similarly, we are also seeing a lot of teams coming out of Ultrahuman and trying to build hardware products, right? And the kind of knowledge they possess about what it takes to sell a hardware product in global markets is very different, right? So I believe that even for consumer businesses, it will probably take one or two companies to kind of do a lot of iterations and get to what does it take. But I'm sure as the number of company expands, let's say if there are 5 companies which gets to that scale, I'm sure there'll be some knowledge that will be there in the ecosystem to say, okay, fine, this is the way to crack the global consumer brand out of India. At least that's how I think about it.
Well, I think it's interesting you said that, even as I said, Dashtune is an ex-Pocket FM team. I think the top people in a company, once they realize that this is a great opportunity, to aap khud ka hi business bana lete hain karke. So
yes,
I think it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that as more and more consumer B2C companies and their teams, I mean, it's not just the founder, because it's a broader team who's figuring out the GTM and figuring out the playbook. Some of the best people will say, "Yaar, chalo, maybe now we know how to build from India to XYZ market, which is much higher TAM, much faster to scale. And let's apply this playbook now to, let's say, an adjacent product or an adjacent service if possible." Sorry, Chirag, you were saying something.
I was saying plus one to Darshit, I think I've also seen it in the similar way, wherein, SEO-led GTM was in vogue, which was found by Freshworks guys. And, if you go to Chennai, everyone follows that playbook. That's the GTM is the no. And many startups have followed that route, been successful. Now, of course, SEO has become tougher and people are figuring out newer GTMs. Let's say I am seeing people trying to do partner-led GTMs. Nobody does, I think, day one, a very feet on street sales-like model. Still, maybe someday that will also get tried. That's usually for very heavy, very high ACV enterprise models. Usually we end up selling mostly to SMB, mid-market. So you are right that way. I think that part is figured out. B2C, I think we're figuring out how we'll get there. I think I look at this from a parallel point of view that next decade is going to be very exciting from a point of view of building or India to the US or India exporting. What we saw because of one Flipkart and many, of those executives now starting to do their own companies. I think you are mentioning some of that ultra human se do log nikal gaye hain, who have figured out, who know how does it take. And that knowledge is slowly starting to spread that this is how it works. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, I also feel like, SaaS is like Revant said, I think thoda B2B mein it's easier. Number of buyers are limited. You know exactly how to get into the company. But I think the moment you move outside SaaS, I think the complexity of cracking a business globally becomes fairly high, right? I think, for example, if you look at traditional industries where we have done well on export, like if you look at pharmaceuticals, look at Sun or Divi's Labs, I think you first have to find what is that one API that really works, whether it's naproxen, gabapentin in the case of Divi's. Then I can imagine that they have that API, they have a feet on street situation that they're going to large, Pfizer's and all of the world. Then they find those buying managers. Then they find what are the 20 drugs in their R&D pipeline for the next 30 years. Then they start figuring out how to put up capacities in India for APIs for those drugs. And then they move forward. Or SRF, for example, in chemicals. I think that they're number one in alkyl intermediates, right? So I'm assuming some person in SRF at some point in some conversation would have realized that this is a gap, or the current alternative is on the right side of the cost curve, and they would have come and put in the capacity and then gone and met. And then after the third conversation would be about nylon 6 and then belting fabrics and then 5 more things. But it requires a lot like we think about consumer brands, they're even more complex because every consumer is different. So how do you build from India for the world with a consumer group that is so spread out in the millions, where trends are going to change super, super quickly, and it's not easy to customize products which are, in traditional industries, even in consumer brands for these for global market. So I think we think of it as complex GTM. I think it's very, very difficult. But my view is, I think India is also a country which, because of increasing travel, I don't think like a consumer in the US or a consumer in Middle East now seems so far off like what they would seem in, like, let's say 1990.
Yeah, I think the other point, I would disagree a little, Shantanu, on one thing. India में ना, because TAM छोटा है, हमें 10 चीज करनी पड़ती है, right? तो इसलिए आपको complex लगता है. But if you think about it, what has an ultra human done? Like, there's a one product, your very core ICP, and because it is so expensive, see, people want to go to. Why does SaaS in US get venture dollar but SaaS building in India does not? Because people are like, यार आप सबसे बड़े enterprise को भी बेचोगे ना, अगर let's say आपने Axis Bank को कुछ बहुत ही critical SaaS product बेच दिया, फिर भी your best thing is you'll get the $500,000 ARR from that, and that account closure के लिए आपको 3 साल लगेगी, right? Whereas it may take you 1 year for an enterprise in the US, but will get a $3 million average contract value.
I am on the other side, तो मेरे को लगता है B2B ज़्यादा मुश्किल है, B2C आसान है. Maybe I haven't done the B2C side. Why I believe so is that at least you can get the initial traction without having local presence.
Yes.
Let's say that's why I'm telling you in B2B, Revant, what you are saying, if you have to close $1 million contract in US, you need to get someone who can do your sales. And getting that one person, I'm telling you, I have just come out of a call today, and it became a pitch session where I was pitching someone. We are trying to hire someone, first international employee, and it became like a VC pitch session that why should I join you? So it's very hard in terms of, are we going to really work for a company from India? Those are the questions which people have. and is it stable, not stable? We haven't heard of you.
Actually,
So,
I agree with you, Chirag. मैं नहीं
ट्रस्ट
बोलूँ
वाला
कि
इक्वेशन जो है ना वो बहुत इट्स अ
हाँ
डिस्टेंस टू ट्रैवल.
I agree. Like for example, Shantanu, you could list your products like Amazon Global
Amazon
Selling
पे लिस्ट कर
Program.
दो, एटलीस्ट सेल तो आ जाता है ना.
At least you get to know reviews पढ़ लो, ठीक है नहीं है PMF आएगा नहीं आएगा. Then you can figure do you want to even build in let's say a UK or a Germany or something like that, right? But even for a consumer hardware product, or actually I'll tell you what was the interesting thing. Pocket FM, from what I understand, had audio stories for India where they would per story, per series, let's say monetize with a certain amount. But when they launched a series, let's say for the US market, like one series netted them like $25 million. Because the dollar amount that people are ready to pay for the same thing, like see again, $90,000 GDP per capita versus $2,000 GDP per capita. The difference is not volume. Like even the US has like 300 million people, out of which you don't need even more than a million, because the amount of dollar they're willing to pay for a high quality product or a high quality service is very different. So I'm agreeing with you, Chirag. मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि B2C में you can A, do it remotely, B, you don't need to send huge volumes. Like in my
Because you're
view,
saying the average order value is much higher.
is massive, or your
Massive.
LTV is also massive.
And also, I think Revant, you also made a point that CACs are higher, etc. But don't you think that earning, or let's say the spend to revenue ratio in those markets, if you hit PMF, it actually pays off for it?
It does. The problem is, do you hit PMF? And getting to that requires you to maybe either burn a lot of money or have a real strong insight that nobody does. Like for example, what I understand from the couple of people I've spoken to on Ultra Human versus Aura. Aura has been in the US for the last 10 plus years. But they follow a subscription model like Whoop, right? कि आपको subscription ही लेना है. We are not available on Amazon. We are not available on Walmart, etc. Ultra Human took the product approach saying we are as good, if not better than Aura. Other thing is it's a one-time purchase. So it's not strictly a ARR. In the end, they have to continuously sell to new customers to make that revenue. Whereas Aura is actually ARR, right? Because it's a subscription revenue. Like if you want to continue using Whoop, you have to keep paying every year. So there is a slight quality of revenue difference, but it's a different approach they do. People love the product, they bought it, they use it. I think there will be a value-added service approach like India में होता है कि product बेच दिया, अब ऊपर से पैसा कमाना है subscription से, तो कैसे कमाएंगे? I'm sure they'll figure it out. But
it's the Apple approach.
Correct. So they'll
come up with services, they'll come up with warranty, etc.
Correct. So it's a different approach. And as soon as they saw customer love for the product, they said, what is the easiest way to enter? Aura took a very hard GTM, which is subscription ही pay करना है. उसमें तो CAC का बहुत ज़्यादा है. Like the reason Ultra Human is profitable, or a head out, for example, which was all SEO led and they partnership led as well. Right? Like if you go to Dubai, you search anything, everything will lead you to a head out website. Even official government, public places that you want to visit. You want to go to Burj Khalifa, 125th floor, head out will be selling the tickets, right? So massive partnership led approach and very sorted long-term orientation ki yaar aaram se banao karke, but the customer experience has to be flawless. The dollar proposition, you cannot sell it cheap. Like I'm sure, I don't know how much you can talk about it, Chirag, but for the same service you're offering in India, you are charging a significant premium for the same service in a UK or a Middle East, because people are willing to pay. You're still the cheapest technique while you are being the best service provider. So, like, I don't know if you know, Shantanu, but credit card costs in the US, like हम UPI पे 0 देते हैं, it's still like 2.5%, right? So we have figured out a very low cost way of giving a fabulous product or a fabulous service. Your ability to therefore charge a premium, as long as your product is good enough for those markets. Like if you're the best health tracker in Germany, people will pay you top dollar for it, which will be 4 times what an Indian will pay for you. Even the richest Indian will pay for your product, right? So you don't need a lot of volume. I think that's the limited point I'm trying to make, Shantanu. It's never a value game versus a volume game.
And also, I think, you made an interesting point, and I think Shantanu also touched upon it in his opening remarks, that, when you end up building for India, and let's say if you have won India, does that give you a license to win globally also? Or, if you ever, let's say in your aspirations, wanted to build a global company, is it to build out global day one, right? And not focus on India. Because as we have seen, like in case of Uber also, it contributed to 1% of revenue. Why do you want to even concentrate here? I have seen, this journey of, I'm sure you guys have also seen in some of your investments where people build up for India, get some few traction, and then take it globally, and then they figure out. At least my answer there is that we want to build global, like go day one, build for a global client. I think those clients are very different. Expectations are very different. UI, UX experience expectations are very, very different. Right. So in my view, Shantanu, you asked this question that is that a trap? I have an affirmative there that it's a trap. If you think that either build a solid business for India, which can self-sustain, but don't think about that. I've seen what happens is you get 10 clients in India and then suddenly you see PMF है. That 10 becomes 100. फिर 100 के बाद, a VC would ask you, यार इंडिया का तो खत्म हो गया, क्या करना? तो पैसे तो नहीं मिलेंगे अब. Now, the obvious answer people will say is, मैं US जाऊंगा. But then the question with Darshit will ask is US DTM कहाँ है? And that's where it will fall. So day one पे ही, in a limited time market, तो day one पे ही, at least I figured out that answer. But Darshit, has that changed in the last few years where you have seen India में success and then people going out? Because I think India market is also expanded.
No, I think before Darshit, I think I'll just add one layer to this, and Darshit, you can kind of chime in. I think one is, does the industry or the product have to be customized for local geographies? Is a very important question that a company has to answer, right? I think to give you an example, if you were to look at, we are all on laptops right now. If you were to look at the laptop industry, I don't think any of the laptop manufacturers has to truly customize their product for different geographies if it's an English speaking customer for the most part, whether it's screen size or processing speed or whatever are the specs. You can sell a Dell laptop in India and the US and you will find a customer for it. We were looking at, for example, an industry in India that is totally exploding from a market size standpoint, of course, currently under stress, but everyone's coming in, which is paints. Last 10 years has seen massive volume growth in paints. People are using it a lot, multiple colors across, whether it's home decor inside or outside, etc. And you're seeing Birla come in, everyone come in. And now Asian Paints is now thinking really about global. Now, that is an industry where there is a certain amount of customization. So if you're a paints promoter, going to, let's say, an Indonesia or let's say an African country or a Middle Eastern country, for you will have to really think about assortment and GTM distribution a little differently. And then third, where things are really, like food, for example, is a place where I think for Rebel to go into Indonesia would have been would be like starting a totally new business, even though you might have a lot of learnings and so on. So I feel like the industry you're in truly defines how difficult globalization is. And if you as a founder or you as a leadership team are able to figure out how to customize, how easy is the cost of marginal customization, and then what that GTM distribution is, I think will help a lot, whether it's B2B or B2C. So with that layer, Darshit, I think will be good to get your thoughts on this.
No, I think the way at least I look at this is there are products which can be sold remotely and there are products which can't be sold remotely, right? So let's talk about first the products which can be sold remotely. So let's say gaming, to an extent even a consumer product, right? Or even a developer tool, right? Let's say Postman. You don't need a presence in US to be able to sell a tool to a developer out of India, basically, right? So I think there it largely boils down to, in my view, the quality of product, right? And Postman got adopted because they developed a pretty kick-ass tool which developers needed, right? It had nothing to do with or I would say GTM was probably the second important factor, but the hero was the product, right? It's just the product which sold itself into the market, right? And that is, so at least the product, in the products you can sell remotely, it's really the product which sells itself is what matters, right? And just to give you the perspective, right, I think I was talking to recently somebody who was trying to build a Ayurveda products out of India selling into US, right? And we are doing some research as part of that. So apparently Ashwagandha is becoming a big trend in US, right? So we just try to figure out what's happening there. And we figured out the top, it's just selling like crazy, but the top 3 sellers selling Ashwagandha in US are actually the Chinese manufacturers, basically, right?
Wow.
Now that tells you that your competition suddenly expands massively as you go from from India to US. So selling Ashwagandha is not a great business. While it may have a lot of demand, but there is no differentiation in your product. The product doesn't sell itself, right? So I think in my view, if you can sell something remotely and develop a great product, I think definitely there is a chance, right? Be it a gaming or be it digital content or whatever. I think coming to something which requires a feet on street, if you're selling a for $50,000 software or $100K software, you need to go through a typical enterprise sales process. Our learning is that selling in India and going to US after a few years is actually a waste of time in our view. And I'll tell you what is our learning out of that is, what tends to happen is that, let's say you sold to India, got a product right. Even if your product can sell as it is into US, don't need to customize the product. But what tends to happen is whatever GTM work for you in India, because India you can do a lot of network driven GTM because you can know people in your network and you can do a lot of the network GTM works. The US it doesn't work, right? You need to figure out what works, right? The first thing you need to do is to find some first 5 reference customers that everybody can trust that this product actually works, right? That unfortunately you have to do it yourself as a founder. No salesperson is going to join you out of US. To Chirag, your point, that's an issue that pretty much everybody has bumped into. That you will not be able to hire A+ salesperson, right?
You know, somebody gave me a very interesting analogy to this कि कोई US की कंपनी है, वो इंडिया आना चाहती है और वो एक यहाँ पे एग्जीक्यूटिव हायर कर लेती है. हाउ मच परसेंटेज प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ सक्सेस वुड यू गिव देम? एक स्टार्टअप है. तो माय आंसर वाज कि यार 10-15% सक्सेस होगा शायद.
Yes.
So he said, why won't the same principle allow to apply to us?
Correct.
You know, why would you bring yourself कि तुम यहाँ बैठे हो and you hire someone there day one? The probability is going to be like maybe less than 10%.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I think that was an interesting way where at least मेरे को समझ में आया कि ये ऐसे नहीं होएगा. Either you are right, either founder has to go, or you know you figure out 0 to 1 in some way. I think what you're mentioning too is at least the era which we have seen in the remote selling is product-led growth. That product itself leads to growth. It's by the way, a very different way of building product. The motion itself is very different, which has worked till now.
Yeah, so I think in an enterprise sales motion, the challenge is that as a founder, you have to do the first $1 million sales yourself, right? To establish the PMF, establish what GTM works, right? I think the biggest thing is how do you get the leads, for example, right? The cold outbound LinkedIn is dead, right? There's no way you can get there. So how do you get the leads, right? So establish the first 5 reference customer, establish the GTM, and then, okay, once you have that, then you can probably hire a VP of sales to say, this is the playbook, go run with it, right? But to set that first 5 reference customers and to establish the playbook, the founder needs to be there, right? I think, so the more time you are doing in India, it's actually the time taken away from the time you will take to establish the US GTM, right? So sometimes Indian companies tend to spend 3 years doing India and then spend 2 years perfecting the US GTM. So by the time you get to your first $1 million ARR in the US, it's 5 years, right? That is like a very, I would say it's a slow growth for where the world is today, right? And you guys would have seen in US, the companies are moving at a pace which I think you can't justify getting to $1 million ARR in 5 years. I think that's how at least I would put it.
I saw latest tweet where companies are getting to 50 million ARR in less than 6 months. And all of them are AI companies. All of them are AI companies, right?
And all of them are product-led growth, by the way. Okay, pretty much everything is product-led growth.
Yeah, product goes viral. People are like, कि भाई बहुत बढ़िया product है, $20 subscription दे रहे हैं, लोग use कर रहे हैं because the product is just so great. I mean, AI is really, while it's making it easier to build high-quality code more efficiently with lesser people. Actually, that's the other interesting side. Most of them are less than 200 people. But it's also really increasing the velocity of GTM and discovery, because everybody's trying to build more efficiency in their life. And every new AI tool that will give me more efficiency, so almost like FOMO है सबको कि भाई हम पीछे नहीं छूटने चाहिए. So let's use more AI. So every new tool that comes in, people are like, चलो ये भी try करते हैं, जिससे मेरा ये भी better हो गया. Like I didn't know Bolt is allowing you to build a full-fledged website in like with just pure AI, and it's like 50 million. 50 million ARR in 4 months. 4 महीने पुरानी company है. So you're right. I mean, that's why everyone says SaaS is almost going to die at this space, or I don't know what it will become, what the new avatar of SaaS will be, but interesting point.
But Revant, I think to that point, I think I'll just give you guys one anecdotal example. So if you look at the coding space, right, to say, okay, using AI to do the coding, that is a problem statement. many people took different approaches. So if you remember, there was this company called Devin AI, which became pretty hot at some point. They took an approach that I'll give you an AI engineer. Okay, you don't need to put your developer. I will give you an AI coder. Engineer who will do the coding by itself, basically. Cursor took an approach saying that AI is not there, can't do the development by itself. I will just increase the productivity of a developer by providing a copilot. And they had this unique insight to say that AI is not there in terms of accuracy, that I can go and tell you that tum apna developer hata do, put my engineer, my agent instead, right? And the way they approach the product they developed with that insight was what led to where they are today, right? So there were probably 10 companies trying to do coding using AI, but these are the guys who got the product right and took off in a big way, right? So I think it's really now, if you ask me where the world is moving in next 10 years, it will all boil down to this
Insight.
and product quality, right? Really, that is what will drive the adoption.
And Darshit, I think you are right that it is my understanding is also similar, that while all of us are envisioning, let's say, outcome SaaS, we are all discussing pricing to become outcome oriented. But I think the example of Cursor also shows that it will continue to be human in the loop. You are continuing to have more productivity, which is like non-trivial. This increase is non-trivial. But it's at the moment, I have also tried multiple things in terms of building, but it's still not getting down to that I can control the outcome, I can own the outcome as a company. And by the way, I think another point which, while we were discussing PLG, the other motion is sales-led growth. I think, another thing which keeps happening is I keep coming across companies which say, yaar, main software to saste mein bana sakta hu. Let's say a Klaviyo in US would sell, a minimum plan would be $1,000 a month. And, a team here in Bangalore or Chennai would say that, okay, I can build this very, very cheaply. I think what people end up missing is that if you are a sales-led growth motion, your 50% of your cost is actually S&M, which you don't build it in. It's not only product cost. If you're doing PLG as a motion, then it's like very easy. You can actually go out and acquire customers at a much, much more efficient and pass on the cost of being or the cheapness of the product. Klaviyo is, for example, sales and marketing is 50% of revenue.
Yeah, no, that's true across all enterprise software.
But give an example, Chirag, of a Klaviyo equivalent which is doing more PLG, and therefore what would their P&L SNF pass be?
Yeah, Revant, the reality of the matter is that if for any enterprise, if you want to think about it, let's say, Revant, if you want to sign a check for 1 crore a year for a software, it's a trustworthy sale. You want to see the guy who's there. Who do I catch hold of if the software doesn't work? So that's the reality. If you want to sell enterprise, people will be needed. Those people will never be replaced by AI. It's like, one of our common friends, Kuldeep, puts this nicely. You are in the business of selling luxury goods. 80% gross margin, selling $1 million contract, you are selling luxury goods. How can I do it without person? So there will always be companies, but I think those segment will be very different. So let's say, there are many customer engagement platforms which serve the smaller merchants. They all operate through a PLG approach, like many, right? But as and when you will go enterprise, you will start to charge more dollars. You will have a feet on street, which will transact.
What about a Salesforce, for example? So these oversized business.
Clearly, sales-led growth. They don't do any product-led growth.
But is there an opportunity, Chirag, then? Or you think that's how it's going to be?
Opportunity in terms of, let's say,
building
disrupting
an equivalent from India where cost advantage is much higher, and then you don't need, even if you need people.
Yeah, that keeps happening. At least people keep putting pressure on, let's say, enterprise also to adopt PLG. But I think enterprise needs, so let's say, imagine, a software which is going to be used, let's say, a Clever Tap. A Clever Tap today is ideal for a Swiggy or the likes of Swiggy enterprise. That's what they call enterprise. Swiggy will have a 50 people retention marketing team. Right? Serving a retention marketing team with a product-led growth approach and selling that software is hard. It's hard. I can sell one piece of it, but doing that for a 10 people team is like pretty much like everyone does it.
Yeah, so Clever Tap ke space mein, for example, you have an Adobe, which is a $2 billion revenue business. Now the Adobe retention marketing suite is used by enterprises who will pay maybe 3 million a year. So I'm sure a Swiggy or a Hotstar is also $1 million client for a Clever Tap. But I mean, at their scale, at some point of time, people then start either building on their own or move to a even more robust system as such. But effectively, that's what happened, Shantanu. And Adobe was doing 2 billion and Clever Tap and Mosaic said that, like, let's disrupt Adobe. Now, both of them are between 70 and $100 million in recurring SaaS revenue, which is all global.
On the other hand, we have had, let's say, a company like Shopify, which is clearly a product-led growth company. And they targeted someone who wants to start a shop today and said that, okay, we are going to help them. Now, of course, they also have a plus or a scale program where, they are starting to go after enterprise. And hence, they also have a sales-led growth motion there. They have, in fact, hired a chief revenue officer from Intuit.
And if you look at outside of... sorry, go ahead.
No, I think just one example is many times PLCs just also act as a wedge. So like if you take a Salesforce example, say Salesforce were only targeting the enterprise end of the market. The HubSpot came in and say there is no great product for SMB or the mid-market. So they came and captured the market and now they are slowly moving into enterprise. So it allows you to capture a white space which is not being targeted by the incumbent through pure play PLG. At least establish your product, and then of course to build a large company you may have to move into enterprise, but by that time you've already taken a certain market share basically.
Yes, SaaS में बहुत होता है. कल के विराट कोहली पे बैठ लेंगे. आज का विराट कोहली तो बहुत महंगा है ना.
Yeah.
And what about, like, if you look at outside of SaaS or enterprise products, like if you look at what are the industries where this mix can kind of really
I think
expand?
trading, manufacturing mein bahut hua na. Like Darshit, you guys have invested in this company called Groyo. Is that international or is it India specific?
It is international. So you're right. I think B2B mein काफी कुछ है. There are a lot of export oriented businesses which are definitely there. I think, but I was looking at our own deal flow data. What I realized is there is this huge trend of people trying to do wellness and health out of India for US that we would have looked at. I think our deal flow data showed we would have looked at 30 odd companies in last 1 year trying to do that, right? Somebody's trying to teach yoga, somebody's trying to sell some products. Somebody was basically providing the care management service out of India. Somebody actually was doing that you have the US Indians sitting in US providing care management for their parents in India and they're making huge money out of it. So I think we saw that as a trend. B2B is definitely there, but apart from that, I don't know, somehow health and wellness.
Actually, you also got this, like 2 startups that got funded, both senior operators, Mayank, who was co-founder at Upgrad, and Vivek, who was COO at Unacademy. Both are doing, I think, what Deepak Garg is also doing, Shantanu, which is providing blue-collared workforce from India, providing them job opportunities. And most of them are like nurses, right? Which is technically care management, if you think about it, right? So even manpower exports, if I can call it that, is a trend per se. But in this stack of offerings, because our consumers or our audience also likes to understand where are we going at, I don't think a lot has got funded. One of the things could be what you mentioned, Darshit, like consumer product karna hai to agar aap, unless you are someone who's very deep rooted in IP like Ultra Human, don't even try to do something, because it's also a hyper competitive space where a Chinese manufacturer will always outdo you in quality as well as cost. It's a race to the bottom in terms of margins and ability to make money, which is why also, by the way, consumer brands in the US trade at like 10 to 15 times EBITDA, whereas in India they would trade between 30 to 40 times EBITDA. Also because retailer is stronger than the brand. Like Amazon, Target, Walmart are much stronger. Like even a Unilever trades at a much lower multiple in the US because the net profit margins are lower. Because the cost of marketing is too high, cost of sales is too high, retailer margins are too high. So unless you are truly differentiated as a product, and those do really take off, like a Nutrafol, which was a great acquisition by Unilever, just one product. There is actually a Falcon Edge funded company called AG1, which is Athletic Greens that Uberman has suggested. It's like 600 million in revenue with 20% EBITDA, but just one product, right? So you need to be truly differentiated to do well in consumer products. Otherwise, it seems more of a services and B2B play from the looks of it. Is that a fair assumption to make?
No, you're right. I think the bar for product is definitely extremely high if you have to compete in a global market, especially consumers. So you're right. It's a tough ask out of India, but I think many other countries have proven. So let's hope that.
Yeah. And B2B, we saw the spate of funding, right? Apparel, chemicals, manufacturing. Like every sector may people seem to have set up a supply chain and said that we will get export orders and we will fulfill them in some way, and all of them seem to be doing okay. Is that a fair statement to make?
But Revant, there is already an existing trade line between US and India, right? There's already an export business. You are basically becoming just an intermediary. So there is a market creation as such there. It's really, you are basically making a supply chain more efficient, right? So let's say if an apparel brand out of US was directly importing out of India, they had to deal with a lot of these contract manufacturers. Instead of, there is now somebody, a trusted provider who you can give your order to and they'll get it done out of India, right? So I don't think it's really a market creation, and hence that is very apparent in the margin structure of almost all these businesses, right? They are fairly like, at max they'll be like single digit EBITDA margin businesses, right?
But so market creation to koi bhi India to US business ya India to global business nahi kar raha. If you think about it, the examples we used, Freshworks effectively went up against Zendesk, which was charging just higher, right? Like, see, in the end, the reason to go to these, and we have covered the hard fact versus hair on fire, कि India में आप hard fact पे माथा पच्ची करने का छोड़ के आप hair on fire market में चले जाओ, and if you have a PLG edge or a cost of services being lower, I mean, go back 40 years, Infosys technically figured out labor arbitrage and said we'll offer services, right? And product companies gave products that were equivalent in quality at maybe a lower cost. No disrespect to all these companies that have done well. I hope nobody takes offense to the fact that it's just a cost thing here. But
no, Revant, I think that was true probably for first few SaaS companies. But if you look at, like, Postman was the first product they are the leader in their category. They established they established the category. Asura is pretty much the leader in their category, right? So WhatFix actually is kind of a second player in the category, but they pretty much single-handedly created the category. So I think even within SaaS, while Freshworks started with an idea which was slightly different, but I think if you look at today, that has changed a lot, right? There are a lot of SaaS companies out of India which has established a completely new category. So,
yeah, even Ringify, I think probably is one of the top 2-3 players.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Well, I do think, for example, I do think opportunity sizing and visualizing has to happen at an industry level. So, for example, in the 80s, 90s, we saw a lot of medicine distributors or pharma distributors realize that there is a huge opportunity where generic patents are going to expire. So it's good to put in factories and capacity and kind of create generic. We saw Sun Pharma and all of these companies, Dr. Reddy's, kind of become huge. I think today, founders have to think about what kind of capacities can we set up for us to create global APIs from India. I don't know whether you get deal flow of that nature, Darshit, but I think that's what the next pharmaceutical wave could look like. And then it becomes a much more interesting play where your opportunity sizing is basis a different axis altogether.
Let the GLP-1 patent expire next year. Shantanu, dekh kya hone wala. Like, the GLP-1 costs in the US are so exorbitant. Just imagine GLP-1 being manufactured in India and then being exported.
I cannot imagine if China is not putting in like square acres of capacity for GLP-1.
Fair point. Yeah, but I think
even India.
Overall, I think we do have a benefit of the trade. I think if you see the trade tariffs that Trump has put in, and maybe we should also move from this topic to the next one. The markets have been like, India markets have been red, but I think people are finding okay कि अरे सब दुख में होता ना कि खुद का सोचो, अगर दोस्त भी फेल हुआ है तो चलो ठीक है 7वें शॉप बनाते हैं करके, like 5% down, यार. I mean, there are rumors of maybe a recessionary environment in the US as well. So all this euphoria of building from India to the world may be short-lived if the world itself collapses in some way, right?
Shared misery is joy, Revant. Shared misery is always.
But the tariffs, they're being put on by, and if you see, there was this 20-30-year period of globalization, where everyone said कि यार arbitrage play करते हैं, but China has always been nationalistic. We have discussed this on the pod where US is saying now we'll be nationalistic. India is always nationalistic. TikTok ban कर दो, ban all Chinese low-cost manufacturing. We have covered this with Sajid as well, right? That it's important for India manufacturing to grow. It seems that a lot of other governments will take this approach, and then maybe some of these plays where you could, I think software products will still work, but physical products that have to traverse geographies, if you start ending up with tariffs on these, then these arbitrage plays will start going away.
I think let's accept, look, India was a very hated market or the public market, right? I think the kind of returns people have generated in last 3 years, like it had to normalize in some way. But yeah, US, I think you're right. There are a lot of uncertainties, but I think there are some. So if you ask me, for example, India was imposing 80 to 100% import duty on luxury cars, right? For example, I'm just giving an example, right? I think Trump had an issue with that, right? And they said, okay, if you are going to do such, Tesla basically wanted to sell in India, but they couldn't because the car would be 2x of what they're selling in US, right? So I think then basically I feel that everybody agrees that free market economy is great for the world, but where we are today, it feels like everybody is going back in the history of where the world used to be. We're living in the world of protectionism, like pre-91 era of India or, where China was, right? So I hope we come out of that, but this is not great for anybody. I think the kind of tariffs people are talking about. But my view is, at least I feel it can happen that because now Trump is imposing these tariffs is a retaliation to what other countries did to US goods. Probably if the countries react to that and bring down the tariff and then US kind of retract back all those tariffs increase they've done, it may be a net positive for everybody basically. So I think.
How long do you think that will happen? How long? What does that tug of war look like?
But that's happening, right, Shantanu? I don't know if you've seen. He imposes tariffs, max within a week. He reverses it because the other partner country, like why is Tesla entering? I don't know if you saw.
India, by the way, reduced the import tariff on cars, their luxury cars.
Because
basically.
Tesla, they were not coming in because Elon had a problem with the kind of import duties. I think Trump arm twisted. I know a lot of nationalistic people are pissed off with the fact that the Prime Minister agreed, but I don't think he had a choice. I
think same with Mexico. Mexico was putting some crazy tariff on electricity import from US, and then US said, okay, fine, then I'll put a crazy tariff on the goods that you are supplying to US. And I think now there is discussion where Mexico is saying, I'll bring down the tariff. So maybe this is a trick Trump is playing to say, hey, look.
Perfectly, yeah, that's what he's doing. And in fact, we should maybe discuss that potential Tesla entry. How does it impact our, the 3 or 4 or 5 great auto companies that have ruled the stock market and made bulk of the profits in the last 20-30 years. And India is an automobile heavy market, at least to the top 100 million people, right? It would be really interesting to see, how does Tesla's entry or maybe other, I don't know how many, apart from most of them went bankrupt in the 08 crisis, right? Chrysler.
No, BYD from China and Tesla from US.
Yeah, but our electrical charging network is not the best. So I'm assuming non-EV में कोई companies है जिनको benefit होगा. And is there a potential shock to our auto industry in terms of the hyper competition that's going to come in? Or you believe that most of our models anyway were rehashed imports from a Hyundai or a Honda, they'll also be able to cut prices in some way or the form?
Yeah, I don't think Tesla will affect India's auto market in a big way because they are playing in a segment of 50 lakh plus cars, which if you look at India, ultra luxury, 50 lakh plus segment is very, very tiny. It's like very small. So I don't think that will really impact in a big way.
Is there a game to do manufacturing for Tesla in India?
They may set up
because Apple के लिए वही किया था ना? I think the Prime Minister or the government had said कि ठीक है आप डालो store, but you need to manufacture. And now I think
that's what they're discussing probably with Tesla, that will reduce the tariff, but you have to do some local manufacturing.
You saw that recent chart on Apple exports. Two-thirds of all iPhones assembled in India to other markets.
Yeah.
Quite crazy.
I think, are we on track to hit 20 billion this year in exports? Or next year? That's a massive number.
From a value point, 20 billion.
I think we hit 10 last year. I think the number I heard was latest trending to 12 plus.
At least the Nomura estimate, which Manish Singh has posted on Twitter, is 24 billion in FY27.
तो 2 साल में हो जाएगा ना basically.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
FY25 is close to 10 billion, 12 billion, 12, 16, 24.
We should do. I think there are 2 episodes that have come out of this discussion. One is the one on sports and sports and media. The love between sports and media and building franchises. So RBCT, I think we'll have to find.
That's an interesting one to go deeper and understand. I remember, Revant and I went to Dubai once and we attended that karate MMA type thing. And we were wondering at that point of time also, कि यार ये तो अभी start हुआ है, बनेगा कैसे धंधा?
But then
I think Sequoia had funded one company. If I
One
don't,
championship.
one championship.
One championship.
One of my McKinsey colleagues was like the chief of staff to the founder, and she was like interviewing people on like a reality TV show and like participating in punching them. I was like, dude, what a job description this is. What a successful business though.
I think it's not clear whether these are still venture model businesses. I think the business did
What's
well.
The outcome is not clear.
Correct. Because it's a linear model, no? यार IPL, आप साल में 20-30%, let's say the receipts will grow, and IPL still took off because cricket is like a religion in India. I think the one championship is a decent broadcasting and events business, but it doesn't have a non-linear scale, and there is a limitation to how many countries you could take it to. So I don't think the venture side got proven there, but yeah, it's an interesting business model.
And yeah, Revant, if you look at English Premier League and some of these models, that's where I'm assuming IPL wants to get to. I think they are at like 11 billion dollar revenue businesses, yeah. Like, and then you kind of find a way for the whole thing to last through the year. So wo non-linearity can come through multiple ways, like through royalties of the various clubs and then transfer fees, and then you kind of take a
if the examples you're talking about, Shantanu, whether it's college football or EPL, which is the normal football, or cricket, IPL, these are all, if you like 100 years का nationalistic pride है in sports में, so उनका scale ना बहुत अलग level पे चला जाता है. Like one championship or what me and Chirag watch, which is कि एक नया concept निकालेंगे, right? Requires, I mean, somewhere there has to be a cultural revolution around it. Like pickleball is now becoming that cultural revolution. Now, whether it's a trend or whether it will stick, we don't know. But a lot of people will latch on to this tailwind and say, यार, चलो pickleball के लिए हम IPL equivalent बना सकते हैं क्या करके types, right? And then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So one championship was something like that per se. But on that note, Darshit, because you're a VC and we now have a standard thing that we put everybody on the spot by asking questions that were not in the script. What is your view on venture ecosystem in India, especially now with Peak 15, which was Sequoia, the largest VC technically in the country, also talking about maybe downsizing its funds and, a lot of people leaving. This seems to be happening across a lot of VCs, right? We were together at Kalari where we saw that went through its own journey. And I think everyone after the first 3 funds sort of realizes what they really want to do. That's what broadly looks like, first 3 or 4 funds. And there is a 10-year or 12-year cycle reset where then the team changes or the strategy changes. Is that a fair representation of how the venture ecosystem has evolved and will continue to do so?
Yeah, no, I think I feel it's good for ecosystem only because if you look at US also, I think first few firms that started and then people from those firms who learned things, they came out and then they kind of started their own firms or joined the other firms and the number of firms expanded, right? And I think I was reading some LP's blog and he said, if you look at the top VC roster across decades, it has changed, right? Like the people who were top VCs in 70s were different from 80s, were different from 90s. Well, some have been constant, but it keeps changing. So like any other industry, this industry also has incumbents and disruptors, right? And it will go through its own cycles of incumbents and disruptors. So I think some firms like Sequoia in US will continue to do well for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, right? But at the same time, there'll be disruptors which will come around and kind of USV and Benchmark were built in around 2000, right? And then E16Z came around, changed the model, right? And now there are bunch. So I think it's overall good for the ecosystem that people have learned. And I think you and I were at Kalari and we know that how we used to think about venture when we for in our first year of venture, what is what we are thinking now, it's very different, right? Because there is 10 years, so many years of learnings that has gone into it. So
I
it's so
think
great to see.
India का market evolution भी थोड़ा ज़्यादा ही I think rapid देख रहे हैं. I think the US or China still had I think 20-year cycles. I unfortunately see India having very fast 8 to 10-year cycles. Not, I'm saying in the form of disruption. So for firms to be nimble and really, in some ways, like founders also pivot, right? कि अच्छा AI revolution आ गया, how is it going to impact my business? I think the founder mindset still helps to pivot. I am interestingly seeing some founder-led VCs. Like if you see most of the changes that are happening seem to happen in the global VC ka Indian arms in some sense. Whereas there are some founder-led VCs which seem to be pivoting their styles very quickly unless they have grown very large and then need to like वो होता है ना कि जब कंपनी बड़ी होती है तो पिवट करना हार्ड हो जाता है करके. Seems to be a little similar trend in that sense, right? Or how companies become large and then there's a disruptor coming in, then you are not able to compete. Will happen to large firms. But you were talking to Sajid 2 episodes back where he was saying that India remains an over-ventured market. Do you believe so still?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think the definition of over-venture would be that the more capital is going in than what the ecosystem can digest, basically, right? That's probably how one can define the over-venture.
And sorry, but who decides how much capital can be digested? Like, is there a different approach to say कि 1x cash flow तो आ गया है वापस और उसके बाद ठीक चल रहा है? Like, for example, we in US saw maybe a 15-year cycle where the distributions were higher than the incoming venture capital. And that reversed in the last 2 years because IPOs stopped and M&As were not happening because the government was, or the competition commission equivalent in the US was not allowing this, right? India always had more capital going in than coming out, and that never, I don't think that's changing at any point of time. Would that be a reason why that gap being so large where people say that we are over-ventured? Or the traditional DPI, जो हम एक fund के लिए बोलते हैं, which is distribution to paid capital, is just so low if you take cumulatively the 15 to 20 years of venture that we have seen in India. And it is so far from being one that, because if capital keeps coming, then that gap keeps increasing, right? Like how do you, like if you raise $1 billion fund in India, you're technically supposed to return $3 billion with, let's say, a 3x MOIC, which means if you hold 10% in a company at exit, let's take a case of like a Swiggy IPO, great outcome, $10 billion IPO where Axel and Elevation holding 6 to 7%. Let's take 10% as a round off. You need to have $30 billion of market cap creation. Now, Zomato has shown that one company is possible and multiple companies doing 2 to 5 billion is now possible. But if you take a 10-year view and say that the Indian economy will double 2.5x from here, roughly we have almost 10 billion of venture capital still going in every year. And that seems to be the gap, that do we really see 30 billion coming out 10 years later in every cycle? Like every year, $30 billion coming out. That seems a little bit far stretched, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. I think if one way to look at it is that every 3 years, let's assume India as a economy is raising somewhere around, say the dry powder that is getting raised is somewhere in the range of $5 to $7 billion. Let's assume that, and 3x of that would translate to, say, $15 billion of returns out of India. And if I say investors will hold, say, 60 to 70% of the companies at exit, that translates to somewhere around 25 to 30 billion every 3 years out of India, right? That is the amount of exits we are talking about. It today it seems little high, but I am hopeful that with the today's exit environment, I think none of us really imagine the kind of IPO pipeline that exists today that would happen. So I hope the equation will change a little over a period of time. But I think every developing venture world economy go through those cycles. But I think you will see that if it is really over ventured, then some of the firms will have to shut shop and kind of there will be a consolidation and there will be the number of firms will have to reduce, right? But
cut their fund sizes basically.
Yeah, I think that will happen, but only the time will tell, basically. I think in my view, it's
So Darshit, are you saying it's a little bit of a market correction in some sorts? What is happening, what we are seeing at peak 15 is a sign of a market correction, downsizing and reduction of fund size.
yeah. I think I feel that's in a way it's a good thing. I feel because it allows one to kind of generate the returns that are justified for venture. In a way, I feel there will be some corrections here and there that will keep on happening at an individual firm level. But probably as an ecosystem, I don't feel like that today we are in a place where, that capital that is going in is not justified, basically. At least that's how I feel about it.
And that's it. Then Revant, either be the same hoga na, what we were giving as ultra human example. People who have worked here leaving, mostly or at least some of them are going to start their own funds again, right? So don't you think that it's like double good? One is reduction for the market, and then people expanding, start their own funds will also be at least move in the right direction.
I think that's one interesting case. I don't know if you guys followed it, but there are a couple of Lightspeed partners now in the US. Elevation has hired ex-Capillary co-founder as a partner in US. Peak 15 actually announced an ex-Y Combinator principal as a partner in US. I think going back to our first topic of India to US, it seems like Indian venture firms, which have, let's say, $500 million plus to deploy, are realizing that if we have to give venture returns, we have to have an office in the US and we need to deploy either in India to US strategies or maybe US domiciled companies that are run by Indians where we have some right to win. कि यार अपना network है, पिछले 15 साल में हमने औकात बना ली है कि, because why would a guy sitting in Silicon Valley take a check from Elevation on Peak 15 versus a Sequoia or a Benchmark or a USV for that matter, right? But there seems to be that, because if you go back, maybe 2014 is when what Peak 15 was, Sequoia India actually first opened the Southeast Asia office. That was the first expansion. And I don't think that expansion has worked for anybody, because Lightspeed, Axel, everybody followed. But there's nothing in the last decade, there's nothing really to write about the Southeast Asia venture capital. Actually, Darshit, you may have more data on this, but it's not as good. Actually, it would be one level below the India venture market, right? And because we have such talented people and access to capital from the blue chip LPs, I think India to US product, whether it was SaaS, now product, tomorrow maybe hardware, B2B, a lot of these seem to be, and very hopefully in the quick future AI as well, seems to be a lot of focus for the top VCs who seem to have the access to capital. Is that a fair assessment, Darshit?
Yeah, I think today, honestly, there are very few data points to go by to say that that's the theme that will play out, right? So I think today everybody's experimenting. There isn't enough data actually to suggest that, that you can truly bet on that theme to say that that will drive, say, 50% of your returns, right? So I think the strategy that you are talking about, probably one firm that has executed well is Nexus, but they have actually an office in US and there are people sitting out of US doing the US domiciled company, basically.
In fact,
they're pretty much like any other
one
US
of the
venture
co-founders
firms.
was based in the US, right? It's like how you said कि पहले sale तो founder को ही करनी है. So one of the co-founders being based there, and then I think Jishnu was there always. So
पर वहां पर भी रेवंत तो बोल रहा वही प्लेबुक चल रहा है कि we know the Indian founders, so we know the community, hence because that business runs on this, like who can source.
I don't know.
But Chirag,
what's the right to win? I'm asking the same question जो लोग हमसे पूछते हैं. उल्टा हो गया.
You're right. It's not clear. To be honest, it's not clear because.
But Nexus did well. In your view, what was their right to win in this India to US? Like Postman, I think is their investment. Right? Hasura, Postman, Dhruva. Actually, Dhruva is a great example again. India to international, right? 100 million plus. 2008 company, I think, from what I remember. So it was what I think security software, right? Dhruva. So. In your view, why did Nexus win and exhibit this clear right to play and right to win and technically it's a global VC, right? Matrix, Sequoia, Axel, these are all global names that set up shop in India. But only Nexus had this dual model, and now everybody else seems to be saying that we want to take a pie at it. It's a good question, Chirag. Like maybe Darshit, you have a stronger view on why they won and what will make Peak 15 and Elevation
initial success of Nexus was really Indian founders selling in US, and they kind of had a team in US which gave them the right to win those deals against other venture firms which didn't have the presence in US basically, right? So I think a lot of their initial brand was built because on the back of doing some of those deals where the founders were Indians trying to build a global or US focused company out of India. Now, because of that, they have so much brand in US. They've been around for last 20 odd or 18 odd years. And now they have a brand in US market itself to be able to go and win the deals in the US market, going head on against the US VC. But I think this whole thing of we knowing Indian founders, I feel like if you look at the numbers, probably 30% of the companies in US have Indian founders. And like Glean, which is the most sought after enterprise software company, is an Indian founder right today. So that every venture firm is going to chase an Indian founder today then, right? Because pretty much...
But वो जैसे परप्लेक्सिटी का फाउंडर IIT का है, तो मतलब वो थोड़े नेटवर्क्स रहता है ना कि IIT जूनियर से फोन करा दिया. Like I'll tell you what Shantanu does if people don't know, right? Like because he's a recruitment advisor / partner for McKinsey, he will be like, भाई मैं आ रहा हूँ, मेरे को बताओ टॉप 4 लोग कौन है. फिर वो ब्रेन वॉश करेगा, भाई तेरे को McKinsey ज्वाइन करना है करके, राइट? एंड उसके सुपर सीनियर दोस्त से फोन करवाएगा उसको. लाइक this network does help. The tribes are very strong, yeah. IIT, IIM tribes, and I think the IIT tribes are much stronger than the IIM tribes in that sense. नहीं क्या?
यार और वो
IIT also hostel वाले जो होते हैं वो like my hostel.
Yeah.
पर वो इंडियन फाउंडर वाला तो वो तो बाय लॉ ऑफ दिस एवरेज पॉपुलेशन ही है. हम 1/6 हैं, 8 बिलियन लोग हैं, 1.4 बिलियन तो हमारे ही.
Let me ask you, Revant, say you are building a SaaS company in US. You are in US, done your graduation in US. Say you have a term sheet from a hardcore blue chip VC fund out of US, say for example E16Z, right? And I am an Indian VC. You and I from same college. I'll give you the term sheet. Who would you pick?
या देखो अभी आप लोगों ने दिखाया कि वो हेल्प करेगा वहां पर बेचने में. तो मैं दारू आपके साथ पीऊंगा पर टर्म शीट A16Z से ले लूंगा.
But is that the reason why, Darshit, they are hiring people who have some clout in the US market also? Like, for example, Elevation hiring the Capillary co-founder, who was the CTO, so he's a technical guy. Second, was, I think, sort of based in the US and has built a network in the US, has some gravitas in the US tech network, right? Or a Peak 15 now hiring a Y Combinator principal who was part of the Y Combinator growth team and therefore has built a network and some reputation. See, they are not saying the acha, like for example, Lightspeed, I think Dave went from India to the US. I don't know what is their right to win. Bejul obviously is now global, on the entire global IC, so that's a different role. But if you can have someone who has the respect of the local entrepreneurship community and venture community, I think your right to play at least exists. Now, right to win to 10 साल 15 साल बाद ही पता लगेगा. But right to play तो they seem to be solving through first principles. ना कि यार उस system में जिसकी इज्जत है उसको onboard करते हैं करके.
No, I think so. Let's say if you look at the venture, right? The business is about 3 things: sourcing, picking, and winning. Right? If I look at these 3, sourcing के लिए network चाहिए, right? So you need a network in US, right? So you need to be in US. Like sitting in India, there's no way you can have the comparable network to a US venture. So you need somebody who has the deep networks into US, right? That's second is picking. Picking is to a large extent about situational awareness. जैसे we sometimes feel like that people sitting out of US don't have that same awareness that probably you and I have. Let's say a consumer brand company, if we look at, we know this is probably the 5th company trying to build the same thing in India. It's very hard for a VC sitting out of US to figure that out because they are not as aware of the Indian ecosystem as we are basically, right? It's the same applies to if somebody is trying to build an AI sales tech company in US. Sitting in India, there is no way I can figure out whether this is truly a disruptive company or it's like a 7th company trying to do the same thing, right? So situational awareness is a massive disadvantage sitting out of India, right? When you are in the ecosystem, you know what's going on, right? And that allows you to pick at least the good companies, right? And then comes the winning, which is really your brand and a lot of other stuff, right? So I think definitely having a US presence helps you with first 2 part. Winning comes over a period of time as you build your brand, basically. Yeah.
No, excellent. Yeah, I hope, and I know we are on raising Sparrow Capital Fund 3, which is primarily focused on India, but maybe in 10 years, Darshit, you will also have a large fund and you will say कि मैं Silicon Valley office खोल रहे हैं और introducing our newest partner XYZ.
Hopefully तब तक कोई कंज्यूमर क्रैक कर लेगा, कोई there will be some portfolio companies कुछ कर लेनी, तो you will have कि भाई हमारी कंपनी है.
Yeah.
हो ही जाएगा वो for sure.
Shantanu, on that thought, on purpose, you are bleeding blue.
This one, yeah, of course. This is a t-shirt. This is actually got Messi on it. So since December 18, 2022, then India's unfortunate loss in November 2023, then the World Cup win and then the ICC win. 3 out of 4 times bleeding blue. Once for Argentina, thrice for India. मैं तो अगले दिन इंडिया का टी शर्ट पहन के जाने वाला था यार वो मीटिंग में, तो मैंने सोचा ज्यादा हो जाएगा. What a feeling, yaar. Amazing. But we are in control of the match throughout. Like at no point I felt कि they've been being taken away.
We were just nervous Indians कि कुछ fuck up hug ना दें. But otherwise, mostly we were in control, yeah.
We bat very deep, yaar. We bat very deep. Like you always feel like, oh, KL is going to come. Oh, Hardik is going to come. Oh, Jaddu is still there. Like you always feel like, you know, the moment you feel the tail is around the corner, you suddenly get like few more vertebrae of the backbone left. Darshit, are you a sports fan? Are you a cricket?
हाँ क्रिकेट देख लेता हूँ बाकी nothing much.
Yeah, I was just looking at few things. After India won, BCCI revenue in a year is 20,000 crores. अभी दर्शित बताता कितना revenue multiple देना है. 4x, 5x, 6x. But any multiple you give, it becomes a Nifty 50 company.
Yeah, that's true.
But who owns BCCI? I've always wondered about this. Who owns BCCI? It's not the government.
It's an independent body, no?
Who is it?
It's an association.
That's a good question.
No, but see, all associations, whether it's Wrestling Federation of India,
Who is the shareholder, basically?
Badminton Federation, these are all government bodies. All other sports are ruled by government bodies. This is a private body, which pretends to be a government body because it's got enough representation in the administration. But it's not a government body. Taxpayers don't benefit or pay for it.
Today we met a company just trying to build an IPL for colleges. So basically he's trying to build a league for cricket league for colleges.
I can guarantee you that's a winning proposition. I can guarantee that to you.
Yeah, this is now getting across the spectrum. पहले main sports होता था, वो seniors होने लग गया है, women होने लग गया है. Now it's going this side. Right? When people were saying we are like overdone with cricket, I think this is getting deeper. With so much amount of money flowing in, I think that's also a good question that, at least what I'm seeing is India winning, more kids aspire to become cricketers. Facilities are going to improve because this board is going to invest in infrastructure, some of those things.
But you know what was surprising? That there is this organization called NCAA, AAA or something like that in US, which are organizing college level
NCAA.
Tournaments. Major is basketball and football. Those are two major sports in US. Their annual revenue is $18 billion. It's just crazy.
High school sports is a massive business in the US.
NCAA. I used to watch NCAA a lot, yaar. Like all of the basketball's elite talent, if you want to watch them early, you have to watch NCAA.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Darshit, since you saw that company, just for understanding, all these sports businesses are essentially media businesses, right?
Yeah.
Bulk of the revenue is at least coming from...
If you analyze the most successful businesses, 80% revenue is broadcasting rights, basically.
Yeah.
So if you are not getting a broadcasting right on the mainstream media, then the ad revenue is fairly... it's good chunk, but you cannot become a multi-dollar. So the moment you are in a mainstream media, one is you get a broadcasting right, and the kind of ad revenue you attract is very different compared to if you are just being streamed on YouTube or something like that, basically. So, yeah. So they are largely, you're right, media businesses, but broadcasting right is the major revenue.
But think about like Jio Hotstar now with IMG and everything. I think the moment you create a good sports property, there will be tailwinds if there is opportunity to make it entertaining.
Shantanu, difference पता है कितना है ये? I think on your thing that I was just googling. IPL is 9,600 crore rights cost. Whereas a Pro Kabaddi is 180 crores and an Indian Super League is 225 crores.
Yeah, that's
right. And by the way, viewership is not very off. It's like 40%, 25% of IPL.
That's true.
So I think there is more in terms of, let's say, IPL, I think has ticked many boxes from a deep PMF interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least my realization was also that this is a media business at scale from a monetization perspective. Ki
That's
eyeballs
true.
lao.
That's true.
And kudos to Lalit Modi and the team
Yeah.
2005-6-7 to visualize IPL thing.
Yeah. Massively, yeah. He
Crazy.
actually visualized or laid the seeds actually of creating something so spectacular.
In fact, most leagues took 10 plus years to get to a level where IPL got to in like first year itself, right?
Yeah.
In club. So I think it was a masterstroke. The way he designed the IPL.
Also a lot of things like T20 was taking off, and then it was also like I remember in India, Sachin ka like it was like the waning days, right? So people wanted to see as much of him in Mumbai as possible. Virat, Dhoni were becoming big. India just won the World Cup also. There's a lot that kind of ticked from a timing standpoint. Lot.
Plus, I think getting the celebrities to buy the team was a masterstroke, right?
Yeah,
Because it got him the kind of stature that he wanted from day one, right?
But I think that's
Basically,
what
was like.
what Chirag was saying. Ki if you know that it's going to end up being a media business, that business design should have people who can understand media. Like if you look at this Mark Cuban who bought Dallas Mavericks, Chamath used to own, I think, a basketball team or a football team. He just sold it. And in fact, the moment they buy these teams, they first enter into like a massive broadcasting deal of 10 years. जिसमें it's like पहले ही तुम IRR assure कर लो कि इतना IRR तो आ जाएगा, अब उसके बाद कैसे पैसे बढ़ाना है करके. And in fact, I think some of the rules got changed in the US on how you could take tax write-offs. And that's when now buying a sports team is no longer that lucrative in the US. I think people were trying to gain some advantage on having some one-time large tax write-offs, and I think everybody's made a killing like 40-50% IRR on buying sports teams in early 2000s, and then by 2015-20 sort of made the killing and then sold them off as well. But anyway, that's a totally separate. Actually, it's an interesting media businesses and conjecture of media and sports is something we should do for an episode sometime. But let's maybe quickly come to the
WWE documentary. That how
Crazy
you
hai
build
wo
a
yaar.
sports to entertainment.
Crazy hai wo. And I was a huge WWE fan. So Vince McMahon was like someone close to heart in the early 2000s.
We grew up under that controversy ki ye real hota hai. The documentary came out 20 years later. Clearly proving we were wrong.
But usme bhi, like, have you seen some of Triple H coaching incoming wrestlers on how to fall, how to punch fake? It's like really intense stuff, yaar. Like, jab tum girte to you have to make a sound. Otherwise, there are 30,000 people in an arena. You cannot entertain them if you don't do theatrics.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pain is real. A lot of the chair banging is real. A lot of the stuff like stunts of falling from here and there, the injuries are real. The death stats are real. So, it was not real sport that way, but it was scripted, but it was quite intense.